Metaphor is a phenomenon that happens in our ideas, in our thoughts, in cognition, and also in our communication at all times, really. We're always working with metaphors, drawing on metaphors to give shape to abstract ideas, to emotions that might be intangible. We use metaphors to make things vivid for the people we are talking to. And this might take on a very important role, for instance, in politics or advertising, where we might want to persuade, but also generally in order to express and communicate and share ideas, we need metaphor. So this might be at a very basic level. So we might say, I'm hung up on a problem. The person that you say this to is going to understand that this is not literally hung up, but this is perhaps something that is preventing you from moving on. So there are whole sort of little scenarios that might be evoked through that, but we just use them as conventional metaphors. We might also say, for instance, pull yourself together, in which case the other person might be actually quite offended because you're effectively targeting the whole person and suggesting that they're disintegrating. Metaphors are also important for inventing concepts, for giving them shape to something that we might never have even conceived of before. And we can see this happening in technology all the time. So 50 years ago, people had no internet. They didn't know anything about digital media. Now we can't imagine a world in which we can't communicate about networking, or we can't sort of say send a tweet, which no longer means something on the whole that we're hearing from the birds in nature. We're much more likely to use it as a technical term for a mode of communication.
I think there are three sort of main areas where metaphor functions operate. The first one is in the way we think. And the second one is the way we relate to other people. And the third way is probably the way in which we structure text that we produce, the text in a larger sense, not just written text, but spoken text too. So you might have a system of education in which you think about education in terms of feeding students, or you might want to reconceptualize that in terms of nurturing them as in a kind of kindergarten, a child garden, so that they are like plants which you are nurturing, and these might overlap, they might be different. You may address a metaphor to an audience, and some of the audience won't understand it, but other people will. If you say Brexit is the new poll tax, unless you were alive and knew about politics in the early 1980s, you probably wouldn't understand that. But the people that did would feel some kind of extra intimacy with you. Thirdly, of course, you can use metaphor to structure your discourse, structure your text. So you might start off a paragraph by saying, ant colonies are like armies, and then you might elaborate that in the course of the whole paragraph, and so on.
If you think of framing in a normal everyday sense, you've got a picture that's just all by itself, and you want to put a frame around it. And this could be a photograph or any sort of other picture. And you have to make a choice about what parts you want to cut off, how big the picture should be, what parts you include, and what you want to focus on, etc. So you're making choices about, what to enhance or focus on. Metaphorical framing, I think, is the same sort of thing. You use a metaphor, that guy's a bulldog because he's aggressive and pushy or something. So you're choosing a frame of bulldog to enhance or focus in on something about this person you're talking about.
At the University of Amsterdam, there's this resistance to metaphor program. We know at least clear cases of resistance is when counter-argumentation occurs. So, for instance, in the Netherlands, there's this right-wing populist politician, Geert Wilders, and he uses the example of a tsunami of Islamization to say that actually the borders should be closed for immigrants. And then people reacted to that with all kind of different counter-arguments, saying that there's no Islamization, or that tsunamis, they are very different from sort of the stream of immigrants that come to the Netherlands, and they argue for that. So that would be a clear case of resistance to metaphor.
Advertising is a communicative genre in which metaphors are commonly found, and they are found typically in the slogans that are used that accompany the products. These are very highly creative, and in just a few words they pack a lot of information about the product, and they direct the consumer's attention toward the key features that the creative agents want to promote about these products. So, for example, a popular brand of sweets compares their products to a rainbow. Or I'm sure everybody's familiar with the soft drink that compares the product with happiness, as well as orange juices being compared with rays of light, and so on. So all the associations that we have with happiness, rays of light, and rainbows are very positive, are very positive emotions that are evoked by these associations. Most of the times, then, advertisements are expressed not only linguistically, but also through images. And so we can see on billboards or in magazines, we can see cars being advertised together, represented together with wild animals like wild horses. And that suggests that the elegance and the power and the beauty of these animals needs to be mapped, needs to be projected onto the brand. So, of course, when we talk about visual communication and metaphors used beyond language in images, advertising is not the only genre that makes use of metaphors. There are metaphors in political cartoons very often, as well as in art. And a particular genre is street art. Okay? And in these genres, metaphors have different functions, so they might not be used for persuasive functions, like in advertising. They might be used to convey satirical messages or just for aesthetic purposes.
Street art is a form of communication, basically. The street artist wants to pass by a message to society, to people, and very often, I wouldn't say always, but very, very often, highly creative and innovative ways, which are sociopolitically motivated. In Athens, there was a street artworks by the artist Absent, and it's basically, if you're familiar with the Greek, with the girl and the balloon, the Banksy. So the Greek street artist, with reference to Banksy, what he did, we have the girl with a Greek color flag skirt, and then instead of a balloon, a heart-shaped balloon, you have a euro sign balloon. So the girl kind of trying to either release it or cuts it up in a way, these ambiguous and polysemous messages that you can get. Basically, we tried to establish a bottom-up procedure, how we can identify and interpret visual metaphors in the specific genre of street art. Usually people that come from different backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, can very easily identify the intriguing things, the tension between pictorial objects. But then, in order to construct the directionality, you need to have all these sociocultural and contextual components. So the result was that we analyzed 50 images out of my corpus, and we had a full agreement only on 5 of them, I think. So this is a strong claim that people that pass by and see street artworks usually understand that something is going on here and there is tension, blah, blah, blah. But then you need to ask someone, you need to bring the background knowledge, otherwise you're basically stuck.
In our current eye tracking study, we are interested in seeing whether there are any differences, any processing differences between sentences like the principal cut the budget like grass in comparison to something with a more neutral context like the principal cut the budget like last year. So in the first case, we would expect processing differences, and these would be seen in longer reading times, longer fixations, but also in possible regressions, so reanalysis, so you go back and read something again. So what this study is actually aiming to do is to understand the communicational process better and to see what are the linguistic mechanisms that can help the listener actually notice a metaphor and then process it differently.
Metaphor is really absolutely fundamental to communication and a hugely powerful tool which politicians through the ages have always recognised, poets have recognised that, and increasingly I think there is interest in getting a kind of scientific grasp of the way in which metaphor works as a means of shaping people's ideas, influencing their behaviour, and really often changing how they act, which can have very powerful political consequences as well as emotional consequences and affect people's private lives, and it can affect whole nations.